I thought I was on a one-way fast lane to either heart attack or burnout or both. And so that led me to kind of reflecting on who am I? Who am I today? And I was nothing like the person I dreamed of being when I was the young, crazy kid. I couldn't define myself other than career Shawn. I knew that lack of balance was there, but I was being so successful in my career pillar that I just ignored it.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Life's Second Act. This is the podcast that delves into the challenges, new directions and uncertainties that can come during midlife. And I do that through talking to people who have a story to tell, an insight to share or a snippet of something special. As you may know by now, my name is Simon Burgess and in this episode I'm speaking to Shawn Hamill. Shawn lives just west of Toronto in Canada and he's 57. Shawn is a former sales manager who has spent years climbing the corporate ladder. He's known for his results-driven approach. He's built a strong reputation in sales, team building and relationship management. But as he advanced in his career, achieving all the hallmarks of success, financial stability, a secure family life, and a professional respect, Shawn found himself asking a profound question: is there more to life than this? In his book, Without a Compass, Shawn shares his journey of stepping away from the corporate world to seeking a life that aligns with his deeper sense of purpose. This decision led him and his family, including their 2 dogs, to leave behind the conventional path and embark on a transformative journey. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Shawn, your journey, I think, from what I understand, highlights that kind of double-edged sword of success. You've had career milestones that have provided you with accomplishments, but they probably also distance you a little bit more from maybe your true self. You know, you've left the comfort now of this stable life. You've faced the fears. You've found courage to step away from it. And you've documented all this in your book, of course, Without a Compass, charting a course for a deeper, more meaningful life. So take me back. Tell me about that moment when you felt things had to change. What happened? What led up to that point?
Well, I think to start, to just give you kind of a brief background. I mean, I talk in the book a lot about my father, and I talk lightheartedly about how I used to drive my father crazy and stuff. But the one thing that my father gave me more than anything else is if you're going to do something, you do it fully and effectively, and you be the best version of yourself. So I got into the business world. My dad was in sales and he was very good. I had tremendous respect for him and his ability to connect with people and serve their needs. And so that was the bar that was set for me. And so I got into the business world. I had to outperform my father. It was a necessity, make sure that I was respected in my industry as much as him. And so I only knew one gear, and that was full on ahead. To add to that, I had to grow up really quickly. My first wife and I, we ended up having children a lot quicker than we expected. So I had to go from this dreamer to this responsible self very quickly. And suddenly I woke up one day and started to take an inventory of where I was at. And, I was around the early 40s. And when I did the inventory, I had high blood pressure. And the best way I could summarize it is I thought I was on a one-way fast lane to either heart attack or burnout or both. And so that led me to kind of reflecting on who am I? Who am I today? And I was nothing like the person I dreamed of being when I was the young, crazy kid, right? I dreamt of living a simple life on the beach, by an ocean, and selling T-shirts on the beach was the metaphor. And all of a sudden, I'm this serious guy that's traveling all over North America every week, barely spending any time with my family. And I couldn't define myself other than career Shawn. And, I was headed to a sales meeting. Long story short, there was organizational changes that the person I was reporting into I got along with great, and we had tremendous success together. And all of a sudden I had this new person that came from a different side of the business and didn't really understand our business. He was a micromanager, and things suddenly got really tough. And it's moments like that that really make you question, what are you doing that for? It really helps you open your eyes and see things from a purist point of view. So when I was flying down to go to a sales meeting and meeting with this fellow, I'm sitting there in a holding pattern over Tampa Bay, and I'm looking at the ocean, and I'm looking at these boats floating around, and all of a sudden it brought me back to when I was 8 years old, floating around on a lake in a little 10-foot sailboat, and life was simple. And just dreamer Shawn started to wake up again, and I started to envision what my life could be if I went and tried to start to find balance, right? But of course, you ask most people, what is balance? If they haven't given a lot of thought, they don't really know. So this started me on the journey of I first kind of started to discover my three personas. The responsible Shawn was large and in charge, but dreamer Shawn was dying on the vine. And so I had to reconnect with dreamer Shawn. And of course, when dreamer Shawn started saying, well, let's find a way to go live on the beach, the head shaker starts kicking in and starts trying to disrupt you. And I think what I ultimately discovered is the head shaker is there in order to make sure you're thoughtful with the decisions you make.
Yeah.
The head shaker wants to make sure that responsible self doesn't get too dominant in your life, but at the same time, he wants to make sure that dreamer self doesn't, make rash decisions.
That's really interesting. So can I just ask, when you were flying into Tampa, I think it was, and you looked down at those boats, did you realize that emotion or that feeling was going to come at that point? I mean, had this really built up, or was it a surprise to you when you looked down and you thought, things have got to change here? What was it in you that recognized that?
I was a person that took everything seriously. If a meeting didn't go my own way or the way I envisioned it was going to go, it ate me from the inside out for days, right? And of course, then when you're working with somebody that you just don't think understands, the way you do business, doesn't understand the success you had, and wants you to do it their way no matter what. This fellow was the kind of guy that he would tell you how to tie your shoelaces. And when you get working with somebody like that, it was eating me from the inside out, right? And so that caused the disruption that gave me cause to self-reflect. And if I was in the right place, I would have probably been able to deal with anybody and in any methods. And micromanagers, it's you can work with people like that. But I was in a place where I got so serious that it was almost like, how dare you tell me how to do my job when I've been so successful? And that's the thing. That's not a healthy place to be, right? So that's where I knew I needed to find something that was other than my career. So that's, when I talk about the 3 pillars. When I defined myself, all I had was the career pillar. That's all I was paying attention to. I had forgotten about the importance of the self pillar and the family pillar. And the thing is, if you want balance, all 3 of those things have to be healthy in your life.
Yeah.
I wasn't paying any attention to my self pillar. I was paying way less attention than I should have been to my family pillar. I would get home, travel for the whole week, and I would get home and I'd kiss the wife, kiss the kids, and then start checking emails. Saturday morning, I'd check emails again. If I was lucky, I'd give myself Sunday just to unwind. It's not healthy. I knew that lack of balance was there, but I was being so successful in my career pillar that I just ignored it.
It obviously got to a point where you thought this has got to change, but then you've got to have courage, haven't you, to move forward. So what happened next? Once you realised and you landed and you thought, no, things have got to change, what happened next?
In that flight, I had done a pretty good job of defining what was wrong in my life. When I was comparing apples and oranges, right? I'm looking down at these people living on their sailboats and doing what I used to love doing as a kid. And I'm thinking about where I was in a plane going to meetings that I just didn't want to be at, right? And, it was just such a stark contrast that I knew that made, it was like a slap in the face that there had to be some changes. And there couldn't have been a better metaphor for me, seeing a life that I used to love so much, I used to be so relaxed doing, versus to where I was. That really helped me realize that there is a better place for me to be, right? And that was first step, serving my self-pillar first, right? So then what I had to do is I had to go and actually sit down and take a more realistic look at what does this picture look like? So when I got off the plane and got my rental car, first thing I did was went to the coast. And I went to a few different marinas. I had lunch in a marina so I could sit there and just watch boat life and just see what their life was like. There's no better way for me to have drawn the picture than to see it right in front of me. So that's what I did is just started filling in the picture.
Of course, you're married and you have children. So how did that play in? You had to go back, no doubt, and tell your wife and say, I've got an idea. How did that go down?
That was a delicate thing because while I was down in Florida and I'm sitting at a marina watching boats and having lunch on an expense account, she's at home and they got 20 inches of snow that week that I was away. It was, I believe the temperature was something like minus 20. So I really had to play this softly and make sure I was diplomatic about it when I went home and said, I got an idea. Let's sell everything and go sailing.
Wow. And how long did it take before you convinced her?
Well, when I said, what do you think about going sailing? My wife loves the beach. And she is on the same page as me, the simple life. This is my second wife. Her name's Leanne. And she was somebody that I let get away in my younger years. So it was like she was my soulmate that I just was waiting, the universe was waiting for the right time for us to get together. So when I said, what do you think about selling everything, going sailing? It was not even consideration. It was just, sure. Didn't even have to think about it. It almost caught me off guard. I think when you go through something like this, people are always looking for that roadblock that they can use as their excuse.
Yeah.
That, okay, well, I can't do it because of this. Because it's scary, right? Changing your life is scary. And I think that's what I was kind of hoping for a little bit, is that at least it would be a roadblock that would slow me down a little bit. But she just endured 20 inches of snow that she had to clear out, and it wasn't a tough sell.
So you've got to that point where there's no blocks. Your wife is on board and you're thinking, okay, so what happened next? Because you've still then got to put elements in place to make this happen, haven't you? How long did that take? And when did you really feel a slight degree of weightlifting that maybe you could find a better balance?
So this was in February of 2013 when we had this discussion. We ended up leaving in September of 2014. So we took a year and a half to plan it out. And the probably the most challenging thing is that the internal struggle. The head shaker persona was always cackling in the background with every step we made. And I would wake up in a cold sweat. By April of 2014, we had two properties. One we were living in, one was an investment property. And we said that we'd sell one of them in order to, help finance us doing this. And as we started down that road and we got, things started getting a little bit more non-reversible, I'd wake up in a cold sweat. In this thought in my head, I guess you could call it the head shaker, was going, you don't do this. It's this conditioned belief that you're supposed to go to school, graduate, work 9 to 5 to 65, and then hopefully get a couple of good years of retirement, right? And I was bucking the trend. And that my own father was a person that he was as firm a believer in that 9 to 5 to 65 thing as anyone. So I was bucking my own father's advice. but he would chuckle and he would say, Shawn marches to his own drummer. So he couldn't understand it for himself, but it was like he could understand it for me, you know?
Interesting. It sounds idyllic to me. You've made the decision to make a change, get back to Dreamer Shawn and what Dreamer Shawn enjoyed and his passions. It sounds idyllic.
So I think that the important thing to throw in here is I was able to transform my career. So I was shortly after that realization, I was offered an opportunity where I could start my own business and I could work remotely and I could build a team of salespeople that would help manage my business. And so it's not like I just went stone cold and just completely escaped the corporate world. I was able to set up a life where I could be remote. If I was close to an airport, had a laptop and cell phone, I could still make a living. So I was still able to satisfy the responsible persona, right? That I'm still doing something. But yeah, it was once we actually got going. So right up until the time when we end up selling both properties, and right up to the time we closed the deal on both properties, I was still having these cold sweat, wake ups. And once we got going, we rented an RV so that we could go down to Annapolis, Maryland, and find a boat. So there was me, my wife. My son had just graduated from high school, didn't know what he wanted to do. And so this was his learning experience. This was his instead of college, he gets a year to go and learn life. And then we had both of our parents, my parents and my wife's parents, all in this RV. That to some people would give them cold sweats, right? 7 people. We had 2 Alaskan Malamute dogs, which are big dogs as well. We're all crammed into this RV. And while it should have drove me crazy, that's when the dreams or the wake up stopped, right? It's like, I'm doing this now.
Yeah.
And nothing can stop me. Once you get past all those barriers, the conditioned beliefs and the fear, all of those things that hold you back, and you actually get doing it. It's like playing a sports match, right? Most people will tell you that once the game gets going, it gets a lot easier. And that's exactly what it was like for me.
Take me from the end of the boat trip all the way through to what happened next.
Yeah, so what we did is with the boat trip, we got going on the boat south around middle of October. We sailed all the way down to the Florida Keys, and we got back into Canada June 15th of the following year. So that takes us to 2015. Now, the business I had started was selling building materials, so it got busier in the summertime. So as a result, that's why we came back for the summer, is to be closer to the business for the summertime when things were busy. We were determined. We were not going to endure another Canadian winter, so we needed to have a plan. And the challenge with the boat is it's a long ways to get from Canada to a southern destination where it's warm. So we started thinking about what other options do we have. So my wife loved Mexico, and she was actually contemplating becoming a yoga instructor. So we found out about a course that was being offered in southern Mexico in a place called Tulum. So we found out about this around September, I think it was. And I said to my wife, she had gone back to her job. She had taken a leave of absence. So I went back, and it just wasn't the same for her. She had been there for 28, 29 years. She grew up there and made tons of friends and stuff. But when she came back from this sailing life, it just wasn't the same. So when I said to her, well, what do you think about getting an RVing through Mexico, and we can go down to Tulum and you can take your yoga instructor's course? It was pretty much as easy as the first discussion we had. We were living on the boat in Toronto, and so we had to make that transition somehow. And so we started looking for an RV. We found an RV around mid-October, I think it was. So we did some things to get it ready to go, put some solar on it, things like that. And we left Toronto December 1st.
So it's been a few years since that flight now. Have those decisions been easier as you've gone on to put yourself first, to allow you and your wife and your family to embrace the other parts of life? Has that been easier the more you've done it?
Absolutely. That is the single most important thing I've noticed, right? Is when we did the Mexico thing, the waking up in a cold sweat didn't happen anymore. It was an overwhelming sense of, we've been there, we've done it, we didn't die, so let's do it again. We had smashed through that fear barrier, smashed through that conditioned belief barrier. It's that internal struggle that I had to convince myself that I could still be the person I was and still do other things and still serve all three personas and all three pillars, but I could be happier. And that it was that knowledge of that first experience that's enabled us to carry on, right?
Yeah.
So then the third time around, the third year, we got down through Mexico and came all the way back, spent the whole winter there. So the following year I said, okay, well, I think that the business in Canada isn't serving me anymore. I didn't feel I was giving it my all, and I felt it was time to do something different. So we started looking for a business, something where we could kind of semi-retire.
Yeah.
And, I could actually have days where I didn't have to do anything versus being at the laptop and everything all day, every day.
Yeah.
And so then we found an old building in Roatan, Honduras, and it was beat up. It was in bad need of a renovation, but it was sitting up on a hill overlooking the Caribbean Sea, jungle backdrop behind it. It was the epitome of this metaphor I had for myself, how I was going to live my life. And so we bought that and we went down there. My son and I went down there to take possession of the building on November 1st. This is 2016. And we walked into the building. It was 3 stories, 4 apartments. And we walked into the building and my son says, "Dad, what did you do?" That's how rough it was. And so we spent about a week tearing it apart, getting all the stuff out that had to be replaced and stuff. And all of a sudden I was faced with this. I mean, this is probably the toughest moment I had in the 3+ years of adventure. Is all of a sudden now I realize I sold building materials for 25 years. I knew building materials. I knew construction methods and all of that stuff. But all of a sudden now I'm sitting there and coming to the realization that the way they retail in Honduras on this little island of Roatan is they got a guy at a counter that types in a list of the things you need, and then he goes back in the warehouse and gets them. I can't go and shop and see the different types of sinks and the different types of whatever. And the other stumbling block is they speak Spanish, and I don't. So after I tore everything apart and realized that I had this challenge, I called my wife and I was almost a broken man. I'm like, what am I going to do? And I just explained the situation, and I said, I don't know how to go about carrying on. And luckily, the universe had somehow married me up with a gentleman in Roatan that came over the next day, and he started doing some work for me. And then he took me around to all the different stores. And he said, when you need plumbing supplies, you go to this store. When you need lumber, you go to this store. And he introduced me to the people that actually spoke some English. By that point, this conditioned belief and all the fear and everything else was gone. That was the biggest problem I had at that moment, is just figuring out how to buy stuff.
It's an incredible journey, really. When you look back on these sort of 3-4 years of change, you didn't realize when you were flying into Tampa quite what was going to happen. What have you learned about yourself, Shawn?
I think the thing is I've become a person that I like a lot more. And so I don't know a better way to sum it up than to say, when I was, in business and on this corporate ladder, I was just on one path, and I was heck bent for leather to get, to the top of the ladder. And it was almost like I didn't care, whose feelings I hurt, as long as I got what I wanted. Yeah, it was like just winning was the only thing that was important. And since then, since I've gone back and balance my life out, right? I still like to win. I mean, if I play hockey or squash or any kind of sport, even euchre, we're not allowed to play Monopoly anymore because my wife said she threw the Monopoly board out because I'm that kind of a personality. I can fully admit that, right? But because I've got a balanced life now, I know how important it is. I meditate every day because I know how important it is to build that self pillar as my foundation. And when I meditate, I'm a much happier, friendly person, right? And so I give myself that every day. And I can be a better family man as a result, and lend myself to conversations like this where hopefully I can get some other people to open up to the changes they need to make.
In your book, you mentioned something called the 2 C's, comfort and confidence. Can you just talk me through that? Because I think that plays into a lot of why people don't sometimes go back to their dreamer child or maybe follow some of their aspirations and dreams. Just talk me through those 2 C's and how you discovered those yourself.
When people are in a place where they're having success, where they're confident, for them to say, I want to make changes. I want to leave this comfortable place. I mean, for me, I knew that I could go into a business meeting and I could work to understand my customers' needs and translate that to how my products were going to serve them. And I knew that as a result of my ability to do that, it was making me a good income that was going to give me financial comfort. So yeah, being in a place like that is very difficult to leave. When you suddenly make changes and you're looking into an abyss where you don't know where it's going to take you, that's scary. The important part is that as you're making that change, do little steps that are going to make it more comfortable for you. Start to have some success that's going to build your confidence. Don't try to take the biggest step or bite off the biggest chunk as your first step, because you might fail and it might cause you to stop and not go any further.
I think again in your book you reference it as the power of the first step, because I think it's very hard for people to make a change, especially when you get into midlife, into the late 40s or 50s, and you get quite set in your ways, don't you? So to make a change is really tough.
You know what? The best metaphor for that I can think of is that when we sold everything, we had, I think we had something like 8 garage sales, and we had probably done at least that many trips to the dump. I had a pickup truck and took at least that many loads to the dump of stuff that we didn't need, but we still had a storage locker for, I believe it was 3 or 4 years. So it's almost like that storage locker was our comfort. We're doing this, but we're not going to throw everything away because we just want to have that comfort of having these things still. End of the day, we ended up at the end of the 3 or 4 years that we had this storage locker throwing almost everything that was in that locker out, right? So it was like we didn't need that stuff, but we had to hold on to it. That was our comfort blanket, right? People will experience that differently on how to hold on to things, but you can't force yourself to just let go of everything. But you got to push yourself, go a little bit further every time, right? And just keep moving forward.
Is there anything you'd do differently?
That's a challenging one. What I've learned is that there are very few things in your life where you can't turn it around and you can't go back and do whatever. So almost everything in your life is either success or an opportunity to learn. Death, to me, is the only thing that you can't undo. Pretty much everything else can be undone and you'll learn from it. So that's why I have a hard time really dwelling on things I would have done differently.
Yeah. There's a quote in your book that says, "Too often in life, people search for their purpose in order to determine their course. Instead, I challenge you to let purpose find you." Talk me through that statement there.
I think the thing is the book, moments like this, that's what I'm talking about, right? Because we did this to become more whole. myself, my wife. I wanted my son to get a learning experience that many people don't get. That was our main focus when we started this. But then as we did these things and we survived and people started hearing about the stories, they started saying things like, I wish I could do what you were doing or what you did. And I kept looking at it going, well, you can. You just need to have a plan. You need to have the perseverance and determination that's going to get you past the conditioned beliefs and the fear. And, well, I mean, first of all, you have to draw the plan out. You got to draw what that dream is, right? Then you have to get past all those things. And that's really what it takes. And so now a big part of my purpose, a big thing that gets me excited in getting up in the morning is knowing that if there's at least one person that I've touched with our story and with our path, our roadmap that I've drawn in the book, and by doing conversations like that, if I can change one person's life, I look forward to that day when a person comes up to me and says, thanks, Shawn, you helped me.
So your book was published in August 2024. I don't know how I came across the book on the internet and how I found you. As many listeners know, I'm on this personal journey myself of discovery and trying to work out where I'm going in life and what I should be doing. And obviously the book popped up and we're now having this conversation. It's just funny how it's gone. And if you hadn't have written that book, we wouldn't be talking and I wouldn't have learned some of your story.
Yeah. Yeah, the book was just something that was, I guess it was organic. I mean, I started out doing some blogging and then I started just scribbling stuff down and I just started recanting stories of our travels, and there's some fun stories. Then when I started to have enough content that maybe this could be something, well, then the doubt started nagging at me. Well, nobody wants to hear your autobiography because you're just Shawn Hamill, big deal, right? And so I kind of set it aside for a while, and then I would get back at it, and I started really kind of torquing things. I heard more and more people saying, I wish I could do what you're doing and stuff like that. And that was kind of probably the thing that was started to lead me. It's funny when you talk about how we connected and stuff, right? At the risk of getting into a really deep argument about whether there's greater power or not, we had a lot of things that just clicked into place. Like we had 2 houses and our old sailboat that we decided we were going to sell in order to make this trip go. And none of them sold. And we said, if none of things sells by the end of the week, we're done, right? And also bang, 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 all 3 things sold in that week. So we started to call it the power of the universe, right? And it was almost like the power of the universe was pushing people towards me to say things like, I wish I could do what you're doing, which motivated me to get on this path and start steering the book towards a roadmap on how to realize your own dreams, your own best life.
Fantastic. So what would you share with others that maybe have had a similar moment to that flight coming into Tampa, looking down on the bay and the boats? What would you say to others that, what would you say to others that maybe have had an experience or feel that they need to make a change? What would you share on your experience that you've gone through?
The most important thing I would say is beware of that powerful voice that lives inside of you that wants to keep you on the safe life that you have. It's the head shaker. That head shaker is conditioned to keep you in the safe place. But this nothing extraordinary ever happens in that safe place. You have to take some chances. And if you want to live your best life, it's worth it.
Just to finish up, take me back and recall a story when you were on your boat and you were moored up or you were anchored just off a coast. Take me back to a story or a moment that you still look back to and have fond memories of.
Probably the simplest one I can refer to is when we sailed down south with 18 boats in total. Would say it was the rally sponsored by Sail Magazine. And the first day sailing with these other boats, we end up at the North Carolina Welcome Center. we were going down this canal called the Dismal Swamp. The Dismal Swamp was dug by slaves and Chinese migrant workers. So it's tragic. There was so much hardship and struggle. But the canal was dug for the purpose of making a safe passageway north-south to transport goods, right? So when you go down that canal, it was almost like you could hear the moans and groans of the many people that struggled to do this work, right? The backbreaking work, right? So it's very spiritual, if you understood how that was created, right? But then we get to the Welcome Center. There was 3 docks there, 3 spots for 3 boats. But somebody had told us that they, the way it's the protocol is that if you're one of those 3 boats, you're supposed to allow other people to tie off with you. So we get down there and I see these 3 boats and I'm thinking, oh boy, what do we do? We're the first of our 18 boats. So we're, just idling there. Somebody jumps up on their deck and says, oh, it's okay, tie off with us. And there was my son and my wife standing on the front. So my son is my son from my first marriage and my wife now. And when they first met, there was some struggles there, which they long passed over. But now they're working together to tie us on to this other boat, right? And it was just such a proud moment that we've gone down this very spiritual canal and we recognize the hardship, the pain and struggling, suffering that created this for us, right? And now we've been welcomed by another cruiser, so it's almost like we're being accepted into the community now. And I warned her, I said, there's another, I think there was about 14 to 16 boats behind us. Some of the other boats went a different way. They're coming to it. Oh, no, don't worry. And then long story short, that night we ended up going to bed and it was just the dock was full. There's no way any of those first 3 boats were getting off. It went down to 0 degrees that night. We had no heat aboard other than our 2 Alaska Mute dogs who jumped up on bed with us. It was, I always tell people it was a hell, but it was a hell I would never, ever trade for anything.
What a lovely place to finish. Shawn, thank you so much. Well, first of all, for writing your book. And again, thank you for your time today just to chat, and hopefully we can get our conversation out to as many people as possible. And hopefully maybe 1 or 2 people may take the story and decide to make a change in their life and hopefully find a better balance in their life. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and there's contact information in the back of the book. So if anybody does do that, I'd love to hear their story.
I'm going to put I'll put all the details in the show notes, and I'll pop a link to your website and all that kind of stuff. So actually, there is one last cheeky question. What's next, Shawn?
So we actually are leaving in 3 or 4 days to go down to our next new to us boat, which is in Florida as we speak, and resume our sailing life.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shawn.
Thank you.
What a great story. Shawn, hearing about your journey and that courage it took you to step away from that career that you'd built for decades, and the strength that you'd found to pursue that balance is really inspiring, and I thank you for sharing that. I think what stands out to me the most is how you were really able to listen to that inner voice, those inner signals, and recognise when things weren't right and act upon them. I think it's a lesson in courage for us all, especially in a world that constantly pulls us over success over that balance. And then, of course, writing your book and sharing the insights that helps you make these changes. It's clear you've been on a unique path, and now sharing your story, you're helping others consider how they can listen to that inner voice, challenge their comfort zones, and find balance in their own lives, sort of acknowledging those 3 pillars that you spoke about. For everyone listening, I've added a link to Shawn's book and contact information in the show notes. It's a really easy, enjoyable read full of wisdom and some practical insights too. Thanks again, Shawn. So that concludes another conversation on the podcast. Thank you for listening. If you've got this far, please like, subscribe, follow, all the usual stuff if you can. It really does help to let the algorithms know that people are listening. So please do that if you can. But until the next time, take care and goodbye.